Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking how the 1966 World Cup served as a massive, absolute inflection point in football history. When we think of this specific tournament held in England, the mind almost instantly jumps to the host nation lifting the trophy at Wembley Stadium. But if we peel back the layers and really look closely at the match reports and the data, well, there's a much deeper, far more complex story hiding in there. It's literally the story of a sport fundamentally transforming its identity on the global stage. So, ever wonder where football's yellow and red cards actually came from? Let's dive into this, because the answer lies in a historic, global shift toward highly tactical and undeniably physical play. Those colorful cards referees flash today, they weren't always part of the game. They were born out of pure necessity, reacting to a tournament that pushed the physical boundaries of the sport right to its absolute breaking point. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the defensive paradigm shift, a tournament of few goals, the cost of rough play, the lowest scoring champions, and finally, reforming the beautiful game. Let's jump right in.
Starting off with Section 1, the defensive paradigm shift.
Okay, so the 1966 tournament saw teams virtually abandon open play to become much, much more tactical. Prior to this, international football, especially the style championed by South American teams, was heavily focused on this free-flowing attacking mastery. It was all about outscoring your opponent. But in '66, managers realized that suffocating the opposition was incredibly effective. Teams started dropping deeper, setting up these incredibly rigid defensive lines, and using intense physical pressure just to disrupt attackers. The whole mindset shifted. Suddenly, the priority became do not concede rather than let's outscore them. And wow, does this illustrate the shock to the system? Brazil's famous beautiful game simply couldn't overcome these new heavy defensive setups. Coming in as the holders from 1958 and 1962, Brazil was heavily favored, obviously. But they were just physically dismantled. They suffered a 3-1 defeat to Hungary and then fell by that exact same 3-1 scoreline to Portugal. Just like that, the two-time reigning champions were knocked out in the group stage. It proved for sure that pure attacking flair was struggling to survive against structured, physical organization. Which brings us to Section 2, a tournament of few goals. Think about this number for a second, just 2.78. That was the remarkably low average of goals per match across the 32 games played. Out of only 89 total goals scored in the entire tournament, the emphasis was clearly on limiting chances. With exception of Portugal's Eusebio, who brilliantly managed to score 9 goals entirely on his own, most matches were these incredibly tight, low-scoring affairs where defenses completely reigned supreme. Alf Ramsey's England hit the nail on the head here. In Group 1, they played 3 matches at Wembley, opening with a 0-0 draw against Uruguay, and then grinding out highly controlled 2-0 victories over Mexico and France. Look at that. They only scored 4 times total in the group stage, but because their defensive structure was an absolute fortress, they didn't let a single goal pass them. They advanced on sheer tactical discipline.
Let's move on to Section 3, the cost of rough play.
Now, this defensive masterclass definitely came with a dark side, defined by persistently rough play and, frankly, inconsistent refereeing. The evidence of this physical toll stacked up incredibly fast. In the opening match, a brutal tackle to Pelé's knee forced him to miss the next game. When he finally returned against Portugal, 2 heavy challenges by Jean Morais, who incredibly wasn't even sent off, forced Pelé to actually leave the pitch on a stretcher. From there, the quarterfinals just evolved into disciplinary chaos. With major dismissals for both Argentina and Uruguay against their European opponents, the tension absolutely boiled over when Argentina's captain was sent off for alleged violence of the tongue. It caused absolute chaos on the pitch. German referee Rudolf Kreitlin dismissed Antonio Rotten during the quarterfinal against England. But here's the crazy part. Because of language barriers and pure, unadulterated outrage, Rotten didn't understand, or maybe just flat out refused to accept, the decision. He wouldn't leave. It escalated so much that police officers literally had to march onto the field to escort him off. These high-profile incidents created a massive ideological rift, and we really have to look at this neutrally. On one side, you had the South American perspective, which highlighted a pattern of arbitrary officiating. They felt actively targeted when their players were dismissed against European teams. Conversely, you have the European viewpoint, which argued that South American teams were utilizing super aggressive, violent styles that required strict enforcement. Regardless of who was right, this divide was without a doubt the defining controversy of the whole tournament. Moving into Section 4, the lowest scoring champions. Just 11 goals. That is all host nation England needed to win the World Cup across 6 games. Even though the final itself was this uncharacteristically high-scoring 4-2 victory over West Germany, requiring extra time and Jeff Hurst's historic hat-trick, their overall path to the trophy was built almost entirely on defensive stinginess. This stat is just wild to think about. That record-low average for a champion stood for decades, and their 3 goals conceded also set a defensive record. To put that into perspective, it wasn't until 1982 that another champion scored as few on average, and it took until 1994 for Brazil to manage to concede only 3 goals in a tournament. England proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that a rock-solid defense, a real tactical, low-scoring approach, was a legitimate, proven blueprint for winning the biggest prize in world football.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, Reforming the Beautiful Game.
Recognizing the desperate need for clearer disciplinary procedures after these incredibly violent matches, FIFA introduced monumental reforms for 1970, reforms that literally created the modern game. To solve the communication nightmare of that routine incident, they invented the visual language of yellow and red cards. To address the absolute tragedy of teams having to play a man down when stars like Pelé were stretchered off, they finally allowed 2 substitutions per team. And to combat all those accusations of bias, they entirely overhauled referee training to standardize how the laws of the game were interpreted globally.
So, what does this all mean? As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. Did these physical, low-scoring strategies temporarily break football, or were they actually the necessary catalyst for its modernization? It's fascinating, right? The highly tactical, heavily regulated sport we all watch today was basically forged in the crucible of the 1966 World Cup, a tournament where a defensive paradigm shift permanently changed the beautiful game forever. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep exploring the incredible history behind the numbers.